Welcome back to Harbour Unboxed. It's time for the exclusive, not exclusive, Patreon section of our Q&A. So Tim's primed and ready to pounce on all your questions and answer them to the best of his ability. And I'll just tag along and see what we end up with. So let's go get into it. All right, we're going to start off with a question here that I can answer with the utmost certainty. The front-mounted radiator or top-mounted radiator? I love this comes up every time you do a build. You've done it wrong. Which has lower temps? So, okay. I know everyone has their opinion on this, but I don't really. So, my opinion is it depends. There you go. That's helpful. Basically, someone will do this test. They'll get a case. They'll put the radiator up there. They'll run their, CPU and GPU temps, whatever. They'll move the radiator, and then they'll give you sort of a report on which way worked better, which is perfectly fine for that particular all-in-one liquid cooler, for that case, for that GPU, for that exact configuration. But then you change that configuration around, maybe, silly example, but you use like a blower card, then that will change the whole thermal dynamics of the case. I don't think it matters too much, but it probably depends on the configuration. So, as I said, the type of case you're using, all that kind of stuff, where you're moving the air through the case, what kind of stuff you're doing. If it's more CPU heavy stuff, so the CPU will be generating the bulk of the heat, or is it mostly gaming where the GPU will be generating the bulk of the heat? So there's a whole lot of different factors there. I guess if there's people who have done tests with your particular case and maybe setup, that'll give you a rough idea. But I've found, for the most part, it doesn't make too much difference. And yeah, I've sort of landed on one way thinking, oh, that's the best. And I've used a completely different setup and found that, oh, hang on, top mounted is the best or whatever. So what do you think your experience of doing all of this?
I always just thought, the differences are so negligible that you may as well just do whichever one makes more sense in the build. Like, yeah. If it's easy to put in the top, put it in the top. If it's easier in the front, put it in the front. Do you think Intel has anything left to offer? They've been crushed in the server market by Epic Rome, been crushed by Threadripper Gen 3 and almost everything. Ryzen 9 has the advantage in productivity. Thanks for the great content. Do they have anything left to offer? Well, we talked about in one of the previous Q&As about the 10 core parts that are potentially coming. Mm-hmm. I don't think they will slip too far behind in terms of performance. Depends what Zen 3 happens, depends how far away that comes, obviously. But it all depends on is Intel going to sort of swallow their pride a bit and reduce pricing to make them more competitive, because that could help them out as well. So, yeah, I think it's not like they're at a complete dead-end road. There's still movement to go on pricing. There's still a few things they can do on performance, but it is definitely going to depend on how good their next generation node is. Whether 10 nanometer plus and 7 nanometer are any good, that's when hopefully we start to see on the performance and architecture side a bit more sort of competition between the two. For now, they're just going to tread water as best they can. Yep. But I don't think we'll see a situation where they'll be completely, like, if they can get the pricing right, they should still have a few good options here and there.
They're still very competitive.
Yeah, they're still good parts. Yeah, like, they're not terrible, worthless, horrible, broken CPUs or anything.
Yeah, as you say, it's mostly pricing, really. I think they've in some ways painted themselves into this corner by having, by locking out platform compatibility on such a regular basis. Yeah. Just the one, what's supposed to be a new architecture with a refresh, and locking a lot of the parts. So if a lot of the, your 9400 F, for example, if that was an unlocked part and could be used on a range of different motherboards, spanning, older, cheaper ones or whatever, or we knew it was going to have future platform compatibility, then that would be a pretty cool CPU to buy, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they've tied their hands a little bit by locking everything down as much as they have. And I think this is a pretty interesting question. And I've been thinking about this more recently with the whole PCI Express 4.0 thing. So the question is, with AMD around head-to-head against Intel, so basically on par with Intel in terms of gaming performance, do you think you might go from using an Intel CPU to test graphics cards to an AMD CPU later in the distant future? Yeah, I think so. We were thinking about doing it quite seriously for 3rd-gen Ryzen, but it wasn't quite there in some of the titles. But I've still played with the idea of going to the 3950X or maybe even like a Threadripper. If I was going to do it, though, I'd probably want to change to something that's more realistic, as in what you guys would be using. So not like a 3970X on a super expensive board. But the main driving force pushing me towards perhaps doing that is the PCI Express 4.0. Generally not an issue. Obviously, it was a bit weird with the 5500 XT being limited to just 8 lanes, which isn't something we have seen with other sort of cards of that caliber. But I think for now we'll stick with Intel and we'll see what Zen 3 brings. I think that's probably the way we'll play this one.
Yeah, it sounds like Zen 3 could be bringing not massive IPC gains, but certainly somewhat of an IPC gain plus potentially a bit of a clock speed increase if they can get Zen Plus up there. I mean, not Zen Plus, but 7 nanometer plus up there.
Zen 2 plus equals Zen 3.
So, yeah, potentially if that goes well, then they could become, fully on parity or the leading option, and then, yeah, it would make sense to switch over.
Well, yeah, obviously for sort of scientific testing reasons, we use Intel because it is, well, when you're testing graphics performance or game performance, you're less likely to be CPU limited, even if it is only by 5%, maybe 10% in some instances. But PCI Express 4.0, obviously that's a driving force. And then the fact that these are the platforms we're actually recommending, so it probably makes more sense to show you how these graphics cards compare on those platforms. Anyway, something we'll look into in the future.
Do you feel Intel can price their CPUs to gain warm recommendations in the desktop user space equal to what we see of the 3600, considering all the security flaws, the inferior platform, bad platform longevity, and stupid feature lockouts, no ECC support and all that? I.e., would there be like a 6-core 12-thread at $160 to $170 MSRP? It'll lead frequency but be worse off in multi-thread and power consumption plus the mentioned issues. Yeah, I mean, there's always a price for a product that is still technically competent. It's not a broken product. It still works. There's always a price that would make sense to recommend it.
Definitely.
And certainly if there was like a 6-core, 12-thread Intel CPU around $160, $170, that was like 8700K performance, that would be, really good.
Well, I know to a lot of people, the way this is worded, this question, it sounds very fanboyish, but in my opinion, it's just very accurate.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything fanboyish about it or anything silly. I think this is
it pretty much sums it all up. You have to weigh it, trade up against the security flaws, the inferior platform, and the bad platform longevity, and the lockouts, which are all issues with Intel, up against the opposite side on Zen. And I think there is a price that Intel could come in cheaper than Zen that would make sense.
Absolutely.
And I think, like I said, if it's 3600 level performance, let's say, and it's, the 3600 is about $190 now. If it is $170, then yeah, you could start to mitigate some of those problems.
Sure.
160, 170 could be a decent buy. Would Intel price the next gen at that price? I doubt it, but you never know.
They might have to. If you look at current CPU sales figures or where you can get a gist of where they're heading, it's pretty brutal. So I think they may be forced to get very competitive shortly.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting. Competition breeds competition. It's always good.
Good stuff. Why is it that Steve is already rocking 20 plus different AIB models of 5700 XT while Tim is only using a humble reference model? What's the problem? I don't get it.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have a few more 5700 XTs.
I've sent you a few cards.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Actually,
who is this person? Ban them.
The reason why you saw the reference model in the radio and boost settings, I actually took that footage like 3 months ago.
So what he was doing, I've given him some AIB cards. Yep. Actually, what he was doing was being lazy.
Yeah.
So you've caught him out and you've blamed me.
Look, the reference model is also very... it's easy to identify what card it is. If you use a board partner card, who knows what it is?
I always find that when I make thumbnails for head-to-head comparisons, I'll use the reference cards because people can identify what that card is, like you say, a 5700 XT.
Yep.
But then
I have all the reference cards.
But in the video straight away, I'll have like the AIB card. Yeah, you stole my reference cards. I'll have the AIB cards there and like, why'd you choose with reference cards just because it's in the thumbnail? Like, well, the thumbnail worked. It got you to watch the video.
Yeah,
but I know what you're saying. Like, if you stick two AIB cards in the thumbnail, it could quite literally be anything.
Does every new GPU launch bring this much criticism from the respective brands' fanboys? You two have much patience if it does. This is probably around the 5500 launch, which is the only GPU launch in the past month. So
well, yeah, that's probably.
They all bring fanboys, though.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter what you do or don't say. It's kind of funny. We should make a graph of hardware unboxed Intel fan, like whether we're Intel biased, AMD biased, or NVIDIA biased, and depending on what we say in the video, the opposite will spike up, because I was paid by NVIDIA to say the 1650 Super was probably going to be better as the 4GB option over the 5500 XT, or when I gave the Radeon 7 a negative review, I was paid by NVIDIA then, but then all the nice things I've said about the 5700 XT, paid by AMD, so it just goes all over the place. But yeah, that's just normal. People are ridiculously passionate about GPUs and CPUs. I mean, we are, but not like that.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't argue or attack people over certain things like that. But anyway, whatever. It's just a thing we deal with. It's kind of fun sometimes.
Is there any interest to look at laptops on the channel? I don't really see much high quality, full scope, quantitative testing on laptops often.
What?
This person has missed Jared's tech.
Oh my! I'm sorry, Jared. I don't know what's happened with this Patreon member. We'll have a word to him. We'll let him know you're in our Patreon Discord chat.
Yep.
At Jardeath.
Get on Jared's tech.
Oh.
We used to do a little bit more like individual laptop testing, but I don't really enjoy doing it. It's not that interesting. I prefer to just look at the CPUs and GPUs that are used in these products, so that's what we stick to. And yeah, you can just look at Jared's tech for all the actual laptop reviews.
Tim's just hoping Jared never does monitors.
Yep, I'll be out of a job soon.
But Jared does do an awesome job, and he checks out pretty much every laptop, and he's very much a dedicated laptop channel. If there's something that the fans are requesting, some kind of comparison, he goes out of his way, gets those laptops, compares them, does some really cool work there. So yeah, check it out. Is there any new cooling solutions you guys are interested in, I suppose, except standard air, AO, and open loop? Right now, how hot it is in your bloody garage, I'm open to suggestions. What have we got? Refrigerated? What are we going to do in here? I imagine this is for cooling computer components, though, not me and Tim, or Tim and I.
I think a lot of these things you mentioned are just the practical solutions, which make the most sense. I mean, like,
really, air cooler is the way to go.
Using chillers and phase change and all that stuff. It's like, yeah, it's neat. It's sort of a tech demo, but yeah, I think these will be still around for a while.
Yeah. I mean, you've pretty much listed them in sort of practical order there. Air cooling's generally the way to go if you're concerned about that stuff. AOs can be okay, but sort of unreliable at times. They're pretty good. And then open loop is more for sort of your enthusiast type guys that like to tinker.
Everyone agrees that real-time ray tracing might not be all that now, but it is the future. But what about DLSS? Will we ever see a game that uses DLSS 2X, the one that is supposed to improve images at native resolution, and which, by my knowledge, no game has implemented yet? And will NVIDIA's next architecture still even have tensor cores? Will there be a future for DLSS? I think it certainly seems like they're trying to improve it. They haven't just sort of ditched it and left in a ditch or whatever. There has been some changes in the latest games. I'm hoping to revisit DLSS soon once we've got... I think there's been a couple more titles recently that we can sort of look into and sort of see how that's going. So I think if they can improve it and sort of... What they promise with DLSS isn't bad. Like, it's a good concept of something to have. It's just that the execution wasn't quite there. So I think if they can improve the execution, have a really good quality thing there, and potentially open up to work in more games and make it all that sort of ecosystem better, then it could be quite a good option, especially if DLSS 2X ever comes out, which, like you say, hasn't really happened. Not sure what happened there. But yeah, I think in the next generation, especially with consoles, again, targeting 4K, there will be a lot more movement towards these magical upscaling, render your game a little bit lower resolution, upscale it to look really nice. That'll still be a thing. Will NVIDIA's next architecture still even have tensor cores? I guess you brought this up because it seems like the new implementations of DLSS don't even require the tensor cores, which is definitely interesting. It's hard to say because it feels like with Turing they put the tensor cores in there because they wanted to design the architecture for the data center market. So they sort of had to have it in there, simplify the lineup, only have one die, all that's sorted. But it seems like AMD is taking a more highly focused gaming route with their products, like not really concerned about the data center too much. They're making targeted, focused GPU dies. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see NVIDIA sort of split into, like with Volta, when we had Volta that was sort of data center only sort of market, and then have an architecture that's designed more for regular gaming. Because having this die that's really massive and expensive to produce and has these things that don't really impact gaming means that their products potentially won't be as price competitive with a smaller AMD die, and they'll run into a lot of problems with that. So,
gaming focused, and then a data center die is always the way to go.
So I think they've sort of, in the last generation with not much competition, they've sort of experimented with this, but I think if competition narrows down a bit, they won't be able to.
Steve and Tim, very important question. Whenever these questions start by a very important question, they're usually not. With the end of the Skywalker franchise, would you guys be a Jedi or a Sith? Personally, I think Steve would be a Sith and Tim a Jedi. Why you do me like that? Like, what?
I'd definitely be a Sith.
Would you?
Yeah, I would. I reckon you're more of a Jedi.
You called that so wrong. Yeah, I would definitely be a Jedi. That's awesome. Anyway, digital Jedi, I'm filthy on you, mate.
Yep, got it wrong. Do you think in the current time space that Intel having its own fabs is a blessing or curse? Do you think Intel's drive into the GPU and memory market more aggressively is a sign of wanting to better diversify their portfolio? On the last part, yeah, I mean, it's always good to diversify, so it makes sense. Intel having its own fabs, blessing or curse? I mean, the reason why they're in such a dominant position now, I mean, they're still in a dominant position considering their market share at the moment, is because they had their own fabs. They're able to do their own stuff with their technology. They're able to push out and lead for most of this decade. So from that sense, I think it's pretty much has to be classed as a blessing. It's only now changing up a little bit because they've struggled so much with 10 nanometer. But if they were relying on TSMC for the past 10 years, they wouldn't be in a dominant position. They'd be around the mark of all their competitors. So yeah, I think...
Well, AMD is also at the mercy of TSMC.
Yeah, that's right. So if TSMC drops the ball, then...
Well, and also supply. AMD can't demand all of their supply, whereas Intel can solve their own supply issues by throwing money at the situation. But it's always one of those situations where, it's easy to say right now it's not the most optimal solution, but in another 5 years it may be. So as Tim said, it's worked for the majority of the decade. It's been the best option for them. And there's a bit of a bump in the road right now, but they may overcome that shortly and be firing on all cylinders again. Steve and Tim, when building a PC for a family member that doesn't game or do the most demanding things, or the most demanding thing they do is video playback, how many CPU threads and how much memory would you recommend in 2020? I think for memory, I'd probably recommend 16 gigabytes anyway. You probably get away with 8, but yeah.
I think if you video playbacks or anything you do and you sort of just Chrome using 8 at the absolute minimum.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think it depends on the price of the system too that you're sort of targeting. If you're going for something really budget low end, then 8 is probably okay. But you definitely still want it to be dual channel.
Dual channel memory, preferably 16 gigs, but 8 minimum. CPU cores doesn't matter too much as long as it's a modern CPU. Like 4 cores would be fine.
Yeah, something like 4-core APU, like especially when these new Zen 2 APUs come out and sort of see what they're like. If there's like a 4-core APU option, that would be perfect for this sort of system.
Yeah, I mean, you've got like the 2200G is perfectly fine for that sort of stuff, or the 3200G now, and they're 4-core, 4-thread. The 4-core, 8-threaded option for this kind of stuff probably won't really notice the difference. It's more games that really notice the difference. So, I think still quad cores are fine for that kind of general usage where you're not gaming or doing any sort of heavy productivity work. So, Chrome, web browser, Word, that kind of stuff, Google Docs, email, video, quad core's fine.
When do you think we can expect AMD to update their encoder and get better with their drivers? At the present time, I feel as if my only option is picking up a used NVIDIA GPU as an aspiring streamer. I feel I can't accept purchasing an AMD card right now due to their encoder issues, and I can't accept the prices NVIDIA charge.
Rocking a hard place, that one.
Yeah, it's difficult. AMD, from a technical standpoint, it seems like AMD's encoder is, quite good as the NVIDIA encoder from, if it works. The problem is that it doesn't work most of the time. So, yeah, I definitely get where you're coming from. Again, it depends on the sort of system that you're thinking of building for yourself. NVIDIA isn't too bad in sort of the 16 series in terms of products and pricing. Even RTX 2060 is sort of okay-ish. But if you're obviously thinking of were you tossing up 5700 versus RTX 2070, then I can see where you're starting to feel the pain there. And anything above that's obviously ridiculously expensive. So yeah, I think the used NVIDIA GPU option is probably the route to go there, because the AMD issues have been known for a while, and it seems like there hasn't been much movement on that front.
Unfortunately, yeah, that's the case.
But yeah, you should definitely keep up with, what's his channel's name? Is it Epos Vox? He does a lot of like streaming content and figuring out where those things work. So I'd keep an eye on his channel to see whether they've got the improvements locked and loaded on there, to whether that'll change. But yeah, for now, NVIDIA's definitely got the lead on that one. So I think we have a few monitor questions here. So let's get through some of these.
I'll grab a drink, just sit back, relax.
Are there any curved color accurate monitors, or are they all pretty much gamer focused? I would love a 27-inch curved 1440 or 2160 curved monitor with good color accuracy to pair for gaming, for photo and video editing. I think there are a few sort of more designer focused, they sort of, I don't know why companies use the term designer for these sort of things, but whatever, designer focused, creative focused monitors that are curved, but they're more sort of on the novelty side. Like, there might not be necessarily the best professional monitors, because I think there's actually plenty of downsides to having a curved monitor for professionals. If you want uniform color accuracy, then moving your head around, seeing a slightly different angle of the picture by having a curved monitor is not great for sort of video editing and stuff. So that's why I'd say there probably aren't too many curved color accurate monitors. I'm surprised you say that you would love a curved monitor, because most people I hear from say they don't want a curved monitor and they sort of begrudgingly buy one because it's the best value option. So yeah, unfortunately don't have too many great recommendations for you there.
On a side note, I wonder how many of those people after about a year or whatever either get used to it or prefer it.
So I have a curved ultra wide and I think it's fine for ultra wide. I just think all the 16:9 monitors I've used doesn't add too much. But I'm sure they do get used to it.
I'm not advocating for them at all, but it'd be interesting to see or hear their opinion a year later. But anyway, sorry to interrupt.
Are there any good semi-professional photo editing plus gaming monitors, or is it necessary to go for a dual monitor setup in this case? You can get, on the high end, good color accurate gaming monitors that could be used for photo editing. You can get pretty decent IPS monitors. Even some of the high end ones from Asus and Acer can come factory calibrated, which is decent. Might not have all the features that a professional monitor would have, but certainly for that dual use case they can be quite good. But at the same time, it's probably, if you want something like 4K, then you're probably more looking at sort of a dual screen setup or something like that. So yeah, it just depends. I'd say there's some good options, but you'd probably need to go pretty high end to sort of suit the dual use case. And then, are there any affordable or free options for monitor display calibration? I know you use CalMan but don't have the funds for it. Yes, it's very expensive. It's probably for a reason. It's a professional tool. I just recommend using DisplayCal, which is free, works pretty well. It doesn't have a lot of the profiling features, so you won't be able to figure out how good your monitor is, but it's basic, works well, supports a lot of the necessary features, and just gets the job done. So if you have the hardware, just use that.
My motherboard comes with an M.2 heat spreader with a thermal pad attached, but my NVMe drive has a pretty thick sticker on it. How much of an impact on SSD thermals does a fairly thick layer of insulating plastic actually have? Well, a fairly thick layer of plastic does limit how well you can transfer heat away from whatever it is you're trying to transfer it away from. But I'm not an expert on NAND flash and the controllers on these SSDs. I know they have sort of an optimal working range, and you don't want to cool them below that, and you also don't want them getting too hot because that leads to data corruption, losing your data and all that sort of stuff. So I don't really know. I mean, they've put the sticker on it. So you think I shouldn't say this because manufacturers do dumb stuff all the time. So you would like to think they know sort of the general operating range, the ambient room temperatures that this thing will face, and whether the sticker is beneficial or not, or whether it will, degrade performance or longevity.
Also depends how thick you mean by thick sticker. Is it like a thick slab of plastic, or is it like reasonably thin? Because I think if it's reasonably thin, you should be okay.
Reasonably thin's okay. It does delay thermal transfer, no doubt.
For sure.
But whether it creates a big enough bottleneck that you get a heat build up that's, can potentially damage the drive, it's hard to say, or throttle performance.
I think a sticker generally wouldn't have that amount of insulating capability.
No.
But if it was certainly
this is a fairly thick one, though.
Well, that's what they say.
It's like a bit of Perspex.
It's like that thick on it. It's this massive sticker.
Yeah. I suppose we would have to know the actual model and stuff like that and look into it. But I think if you've got at least some sort of cooling device on the other side of that sticker, it creates a thermal bottleneck, but probably okay. You can monitor temperatures when you benchmark. You can stress test it and see if it throttles. There's a few things like that. But not really a storage expert, sorry. Okay, I've recently upgraded my CPU to the 3700X and my monitors to the new 27GL850, but I am still rocking my old as hell 1066GB. Should I upgrade my graphics card now to the 5700 XT or wait a few months to get a newer AMD/NVIDIA card? The 5700 XT is almost 6 months old now, and I suspect that newer cards will be coming out in the summer at the latest. Well, we sort of talked about similar stuff to this before. If the 1060 is just too slow for what you want to do, then I'd probably just grab a 5700 XT.
Yeah, I think especially because you said that you've just bought a 27 GL850.
1440p?
Yeah, 1440p high refresh, a really good monitor. You've got your 3700X in there. You're sort of building the bare bones of this system that's really good. So I think, you're saying that new cards might come out in the summer. I think that's fairly optimistic, I'd say, based on, the 5600 is probably coming out early next year. Will we see a new generation that early? I think it's more a late 2020 prospect from both brands. So then you sort of, you're at a point where you've got this nice monitor and this good CPU for a year with a 1060, which is probably not something I'd want to be doing.
No, definitely not. No. At 5700 XTs, they're pretty well priced. You can get really nice models at the MSRP. And recently we discovered in one of our benchmark videos, the 5700 XT is about 50% faster than the GTX 1070. And what's that, like 30% faster than the 1060 or something like that?
Yeah.
You can probably actually find those numbers in one of our videos. So it's a fairly substantial performance upgrade, certainly for 1440p high refresh rate gaming. So I think it's well worth doing it.
Yeah, and I think in your use case where you're sort of thinking of that 5700 RTX 2070, but not really RTX 2070 market, I can't see there'll be too many launches in the near future in that specific space as well. Certainly if you were more interested in the sort of $200 to $250 market, then you might want to wait for something like the 5600. Or if you were waiting, for 2080 Ti type performance, you might want to wait and see what's done on the high end there. But in this market, which is the most competitive at the moment, I think, and has really good pricing, I'd jump in. Well, long-time member Ibslice has asked us, tell us about your Christmas and your plans for New Year's. That wasn't an actual question, was it? More like a demand. Yeah, I guess it was.
Well, my Christmas, pretty straightforward, standard kind of family Christmas. We went and visited the various different families, and on Christmas Day, my two daughters woke up, opened their presents, and went berserk all day. My wife and I just ran after them, and they had a good day. So that's the main thing. And then New Year's, probably do some benchmarking, probably stay up till midnight benchmarking. My wife might fall asleep trying to stay up that late, and we're getting old, Yeah,
it sounds like something I'll be doing on New Year's. But yeah, Christmas, don't have any kids, so I don't have to deal with any of that crap. So just go around doing a few family things, and
don't have to deal with any of that crap. Well, I love the way you put that. Don't have any kids and probably won't have any anytime soon by the sounds of it.
I'm still young, so
Tim doesn't want to deal with any of that crap.
Yep.
Okay, final Q&A of the decade. God. You want to say that one more time? Done. Yeah, we're done. So 2019 was a good year. Had a lot of fun.
Yep, it's good.
A lot of Q&As, a lot of questions, a lot of answering, a lot of product reviews and stuff like that. Yep. So this is where we end it.
Yep.
I mean, we'll be back tomorrow with another video.
Yeah, that's right.
Anyway, thanks for watching. I got nothing else to say. Do you have anything, Tim? Anything you would like to add? This is your moment. You've got 1 minute.
Pressure's on. Subscribe. Do all that stuff. Like it. We want our stats to be good. Please watch the video the whole way through.
Tim, you can say anything to our viewers. Subscribe.
Well, yep.
Typical YouTuber.
That's what it's all about. I'm all about that, like and subscribe thing. Yeah. Do it.
Alrighty. Thanks for watching. I'm your host, Steve.
I'm your host, Tim.
And we'll see you next time. I said it. Next time.
I got in first.
Alright.